Hello, everybody. It is Friday, April 9th, 2021. My name is Stephen Mead with Domicile Real Estate, where we are on a mission to help California's renters become homeowners. This is our first time buyer market update video. We do these weekly. And one of the things I wanted to talk about this week before we get into the numbers is, we're entering a period where I think, and I've said this a couple of times, where we're in a point of inflection and that our market is changing. And this week really plays that out in the numbers where we actually have some conflicting information. It's a bit of a good news, bad news type of a scenario. And I'll go over what I mean by that for you. I think as vaccinations occur, especially here in California, where it looks like a high percentage of the population is going to get vaccines, and nearly everyone will be eligible in just less than a week right now. I think that's going to have some very serious sort of economic implications in the next, the next 12 months. So let's jump into the statistics, and I'll kind of go over the bad news first, and then we will go ahead and jump into the good news. Also, I just realized I have the wrong background for this video. This is our regular market update background video, not our first time home buyer market update video. There we go. Now we have the right background. I'm actually sitting outside today because it's pretty nice here. So let's jump into the stats real quick, and I'm going to go over what I mean. So if we look at our first number here, this is closed prices, and I just want to give everybody that quick reminder. This is data that is based on transactions from 4 to 6 weeks ago. So basically 30, 40 days ago. And I want you to look here. Both our entry-level 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes jumped, right, nearly to 700. But look what happened in our condo market. And I'm going to tell you in a second why I think that isn't nearly as bad as it sounds or as it looks right on the graph. I mean, we jumped to an entirely new level here of $510,000. I mean, look at the size of this. This is a 50,000 week-to-week jump. So just think about that for a minute. And what does that say about where the market was, 4 or 5 weeks ago? And in fact, we will show in the charts, and I'll kind of explain why we're seeing this level of price drop. And I'm also going to tell you why I don't think it's going to last, why I don't think this is necessarily the way the market is currently at the moment, especially in that condo space. So if you look here where we reference this in terms of a payment, we had a little bit of good news this week on mortgages. They did drop slightly. So it's kind of like we're more back towards the middle part of March. We've kind of gone backwards 3 weeks in mortgage pricing, but it really isn't nearly enough to kind of counteract this sort of difference in pricing, right? So if you look here, if we look at our entry-level single-family home in 2018, that 5% down, full-in payment for that sort of entry-level property was just under $3,600 a month. Today, we are just over $4,000 a month. Now, not all is to fear, right? It's been almost 3 years since those numbers in 2018. Inflation has happened. And in fact, I'm going to get into that at the end of this video, what I really think is going on here. And then if you look here at our entry-level condo, you see we were at $2,900, and here we are at $3,189. Again, though, that's kind of within the realm of 3% a year inflation. That's not really a huge number when we're looking at the absolutes. Of course, that's probably not much of a consolation when a week ago we were looking at numbers that equated to $2,921. So, kind of moving on to reference this to income, household income required as a minimum with no other debts. We are dangerously close to the $100,000 mark here for our entry-level single-family homes. And for our entry-level condos, again, I mean, we had a pretty sizable jump, about 10% week over week. And, before I continue, I just want to remind everybody that, a huge jump week over week like this can look very, very scary. But the reality is this tends to be how our market goes. It's not a smooth linear line of progression. That isn't the way home prices move. In fact, in a market like this, they move significantly week to week. There are weeks where demand is definitely higher, where listings are down. It's also important to remember that using this data is also incorporating Easter Sunday. We had a holiday weekend, so that kind of tends, not so much for the sold price data, but for the data we're about to go through, that can skew sort of that number of new listings and things coming on the market a little bit as well. If you want a little bit more detail on that, we actually went over the supply and demand side separately in our whole market video from Tuesday of this week. So if you check out our YouTube channel, we're just Domicile Real Estate on YouTube. You can find us there and you can check out that video as well. Jumping back in here, if we're now looking at the availability of housing, this is kind of really where our story is, and I'm gonna reference this. So this past week, our absorption rate for our entry-level single-family homes is in this sort of hyper-competitive over 90% zone. And if you look, since the beginning of the year, we really have spent a lot of time over 90%. And I think that really sort of makes a lot of sense and coincides with how people feel about how that single-family market has been. It was a little bit easier we got a little teeny bit of a break, but just momentarily in the middle of March there. If you look at our condo market, though, that's actually had some bigger movements to it, and that has really fallen off a cliff. But look where those numbers were 4 weeks ago or so. We were in that hyper competitive zone, and our condo market has not spent nearly as much time in that hyper competitive zone. Looking at where this is now, dropping to a 75%, what that tells me is all of a sudden supply is outpacing demand a little bit, or at least it's gaining. It's not as competitive. So even though the prices on condos might look scary, my guess is in the next week, you're going to find that market is less competitive than it has been in the past. So, definitely some interesting information because we've seen sort of these markets come together. And now it looks like that condo market is going back to being a little bit less competitive than that single family home market. Now, if we go to our total inventory, we see something kind of interesting happen. We actually have inventory growth in both of our categories. Yet, what we noticed is that our absorption rate still remains super, super high for our single family homes, but not for our condos. What does that tell us? Well, it tells us that supply is going up. However, for our entry-level single-family homes, we are seeing continued demand as well, and we're not quite seeing that continued demand growing for our entry-level condos. If we move on to our fun new statistic, our 14% still active, this really highlights that the condo market and the entry-level single-family home market do not always move together. Sometimes they move in the inverse, and that's what's happening this week. So if you look, you see, our condo inventory, our percent still active, really hit a low point. Again, that was like 3-4 weeks ago that we were in these lower zones, right, coinciding with those big prices. But now that level has gone up. It's easing just a little bit, but I mean, we're still in the zone where a lot of these homes are still available. They aren't moving nearly as quickly as our entry-level single-family home. Now, this market's is also showing that it's a little less competitive, but I don't think it's less competitive enough. And I think that absorption rate is still saying, you're going to have a tough time in that market. You're going to face multiple bids. You're going to see prices continue to have some upward pressure on them. I'm not so sure the prices are going to have a lot of huge upward pressure in the condo market based on the numbers that I'm seeing. And then finally, this is really where we kind of see our kind of overall health of the market and look at what has happened here in condos. If we were looking for a big piece of corroborating evidence, a smoking gun that market is getting less competitive, here it is. Look at our weeks of inventory and look at what we've done just since our low point in weeks of inventory. Interestingly enough, this was about 4 weeks ago where those high prices came from. We had a low point of condo inventory, and look where we are now at nearly 6 weeks of inventory on condos. So that means, if you were looking at condos, your life is getting a little bit easier. You're going to find more selection and you're going to find it's less competitive. Now, if we're down here looking at single family homes, it's important to remember we went up a little bit, maybe not nearly the jump that we saw, which was almost a full week for our entry level condos, a much more modest jump down here, but we're still at a really low point versus, where we've been in the past, right? And I think that just says that when it comes down to it, if most entry level buyers think they can get a single family home, that's what they're going to try to buy if they think they can do it. If they think that's out of reach, then they're going to turn to the condos. So I'm wondering if if that market continues to stay competitive, we're going to see that condo demand come back a little bit more and grow a little bit. But it looks like a lot of people are putting those condos on the market right now. So that's kind of our regular presentation. Um, I think if you're a buyer out there, there's definitely some good news to get out of this. And the good news is, I think the condo market's going to be a bit easier for you. And I think single family is going to be about as tough as we saw. Both are seeing more inventory. So you're going to feel like there's more choices out there. And I know that's one of the really sort of demoralizing things if you're a buyer, is when it just feels like only two houses come up per week that you can actually go see. Now, in the market overall as a whole, I think we are going to see increased inflation. I know we have a commenter who disagrees with me on that, but to me, all the signs are pointing to an economy that I think has been a little overstimulated, and I think we're going to see a lot of exuberance in consumer spending, and that's going to do this to prices. I think that explains part of our home price rise that's been happening. A component of that is part of natural inflation. I think that also explains part of our interest rate increases is the result of a market that is fearing inflation. And here's the reason why that is. And this is going to sound super nerdy and financial, but this is really important for people to understand, especially first-time home buyers, because this is the reason why it is worth it to buy a home in the long run. The big reason why, or one of them. So right now we have interest rates that are in the mid threes percentage wise, like somewhere in the mid threes. Right now, inflation is kind of in the high twos, depending on which metric you're using. Is it like the standard basket? Does it include energy costs, et cetera? You know, if inflation goes to 4%, something magical happens. If you locked in a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at say 3.5%, just to use an even number, and inflation goes to 4%, something magical has happened. That loan has become free in real dollars. In fact, it's actually better than free because you can deduct the interest in most cases. So, what that means is that you have borrowed money at a rate lower than your savings in the bank are going up, or lower than just the cost of anything is going up, right? And that really puts you in a great position because over like a 30-year period, you can clearly see how you can get ahead significantly under that sort of a scenario, right? Because it means your house might be worth millions of dollars. And by that point, your wages may go up, but your mortgage payment, that's staying largely the same because it is based on that low interest rate. And that's really the magic of long-term home ownership, right? That's really the benefit that you are getting. And of course, there's other benefits like knowing where you're going to live, knowing rent's not going to rise on you. But when you think of these sort of long-term financial sort of advantages, that's a really big one to think about. Anyhow, thank you guys so much for watching this week. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you're watching on YouTube. Questions, comments, definitely send them to us. We love them. Also, don't forget to check out some of our other videos. We have some other videos that we do where we talk about just kind of home buyer terms, interesting topics that we think, and those show up on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you guys again. We will see you on Tuesday for our whole market update. Have a great weekend out there.